Okay, hello, welcome to the second session today. This is an amazing day, part of an amazing event actually. I guess you're all aware of the Good Business Festival. The whole idea of the Good Business Festival is to celebrate how we can do good and do business at the same time. Business has been responsible and thought to created most of the world's problems, and there's an element of truth in that. But if we're going to solve them, business is the answer as well. So it's a celebration of enterprise as a force for good. And this day is all about how the big global trends and global events that we see have local impacts, and how local impacts can be elevated to a global stage. So it's kind of enjoying that global local shift. And we've got two amazing speakers that have joined us, and a third one is on the way. And we're going to have a really open conversation. Just a bit about me. My name's Mark Shayler. I've been working in sustainability and innovation for 30 years now, just a little bit over. I run my own agency called APE, which is a kind of innovation and design sustainability agency. I'm a father of 4 and a grandfather of 1. And I absolutely love what I do. And I've been involved with this event on and off, actually, in its different guises for the last 6 years now. So really, really happy to be here. And we've got 2 people already arrived. The third one, Will Senyo from Ghana, will be joining us as we go. But I'll introduce the first 2. I'll give them a sentence, and then once I've done them both, I'll get them to talk for a couple of minutes each about what they do. A bit longer if they want. I'm rubbish at timekeeping. Okay. So first, we've got Joanne Anderson. Joanne is the founder and director of Innovision, and they offer consultancy services to public, private, and third sector organizations across the UK. Joanne's background is in social enterprise, business development, coaching, management, community engagement, facilitation, training, and social impact management. Look, we often see business as this hard-faced thing. Joanne makes it all work behind the scenes by making it not soft, but we forget that kindness is a competitive advantage. We forget that being human matters, and the work that Joanne does puts that front and center. And she's got 30 years experience as an equality, diversity, and social inclusion practitioner. She's currently working with Kindred, providing business support to socially trading organizations, and she leads on social impact measurement at a time when we've always tried to measure things by money, and it's not worked. We're now looking at other measures. We have much more sophisticated reporting mechanisms now. So the work that Joanne does, amazing. And our second speaker is Oliver Chang from Taipei in Taiwan. Oliver is the co-founder and director of Impact Hub Taipei. If you don't know what Impact Hubs are, they're the world's largest social innovation network and co-working space, incredible collection of people around the globe. He's also co-host of Impact Love APAC, and he's one of the inaugural Obama Foundation leaders for the Asia Pacific. He aims to make sustainable impact locally and believes that through his work, people can find a purpose in life to use business as a catalyst for change, which is frankly the only reason for business to exist. So that's who we've got here at the moment. We've got Will joining us. I'll introduce Will when he arrives. But first off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to each of these to talk for a couple of minutes about what they do. And then we'll open up with some questions. If you've got any questions over in the chat box, you can type your questions there, and I'll ask those as we go through. But I'm going to start with you, Joanne. Can someone spotlight Joanne for me? Brilliant. So Joanne, just give me a couple of 3 minutes about you and what you do and why you matter, Joanne.
I'm not sure I can tell you why I matter, Mark, but thanks for the intro. You've explained in great depth what I do as an organisation, as Innovision. Well, I think what you hinted at, which I think is really important, business is about people. Any relationship is about people. So when I look at my background around equality and diversity and work I do around social impacts, some of the values that I have taken to heart throughout my career. Firstly, I can't understand why anyone would design anything, a program, a product, anything, a policy, without talking to the people involved and making sure they meet those needs. So my organisation has very much been about communicating with a diverse range of groups on behalf of people who make policies, people who make products, making sure that what they do is fit for purpose and addressing the needs that people have. I think one of my other principles that I've sort of learned from a very early age, that quality of opportunity from a business perspective is about great customer service. Why would you design a service or a product that only fitted one range of people? So, for example, you know, a small area in Merseyside, we're talking about marketing, and people didn't quite understand the need to reach out to a wide range of audiences across the globe. Well, when you sell a product, you don't want to sell it just to people in your street, do you? You want to sell it to everyone. So for me, equality and diversity has been a core business principle that impacts on things like, you know, customer service, on product development, on people and relationship management, which all good businesses need to recognise that actually, if you don't treat people well, you don't last long.
If you don't treat people well, you don't have customers, and that's exactly right. And you know, I love the way you described that, and we can drill down to the local to understand this. And one of the things I help startups build businesses, and one of the things that drives me bonkers, but I understand why they do it, is when I say, "Who's your market?" I say, "Well, it's people like me." Yeah, great. But what about people not like you? What about people who believe in different things? And diversity of belief and opinion is really important, as is diversity in every possible way. So I love that. I absolutely love that, Joanne. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Oliver, can you just spend a couple of minutes? Can we pin Oliver, please, if that's okay? Oliver, can you just spend a couple of minutes talking about you and what you do?
Right, sure. Thanks.
And why you matter as well.
All right. So Oliver from Taipei. So I'm the co-founder for Impact Taipei. And locally, actually, we do lots of things for supporting nonprofit organizations and also the impact entrepreneurs. Like that is kind of like social entrepreneurs and also startups with purpose. And secondly, that we provide co-working spaces for those organizations to work with us. And thirdly, that we actually support the corporations to deal with their CSR projects or sustainability projects. So just like ensure that we support social enterprises and impact entrepreneurs to scale up, and also like to support the big corporations or like big foundations to do good better. So that is basically what we do, and that is something that we believe in. That because like the goal or the aim for us to found Impact Hub here in Taiwan is that we do want to support all of the young businesses and also big corporations to redefine success and also to find the purpose of their life. And we do hope that through Impact Hub, like it's kind of like a vehicle and channel that we can support them to find their own purpose of life and what exactly we can contribute to the whole community and the society. So that is something what we do, and that's what we believe. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. You know, and you know, to extend Impact Hub away from sustainability and purpose of business towards purpose of life. You know, I do coaching, and I often coach people in their late 50s, early 60s. Not much. I'm 52, and they've often forgot what they're for. Having that purpose not having that purpose is the thing that keeps them awake at night. So to be able to build that into the work that Impact Hub does is amazing. Thank you for that, Oliver. And we've been joined also. Can we pin Will's video, please? We've been joined by Will. So Will, I'll introduce Will, and then he can introduce himself. That's a weird thing, isn't it? So Will Senyo is he leads the Impact Hub in Accra in Ghana with a mission to build the forgive my pronunciation, Will, Osu Ako
Go for
RJ area as the city's innovation district and the nerve center for Accra's entrepreneurs. And I love this phrase, Will, for Accra's bold thinkers. I love that bravery that sits within that phrase. And his work is at the nexus of talent, tech, and capital, with a primary aim of supporting 3 specific communities. Will, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Can you just give me a couple of minutes about, or 2 or 3 minutes about who you are, what you do, and why you matter?
That's a lot in 2 minutes, Mark.
You've got
but
4
I'll attempt.
if you want.
So yeah, like you pointed out, I lead the Impact Hub, and I've been doing so for the last 7.5 years. Slowly evolving the vision in response to the evolution of the ecosystem I work in primarily, which is Accra in West Africa, Ghana and West Africa. If you know anything about that country, you know that it's a small West African nation, but with ambitions larger than its size. And we are an epitome of that spirit. And so over the last decade, there's been a significant kind of expansion in the idea that people can actually build private sector businesses that can shape the economic direction of the country, and that the powers of government to bring about change has a limit. So that central idea has been something that we have kind of tapped into, that palpable energy to drive a whole new generation of young people and build a legitimate path for them to get from idea and to market with all the levels of support they might need. Now that vision has evolved into us realizing that to be able to drive change, sometimes you have to do it from the outside, but with insiders. And that is what we've managed to do, which is primarily create an infrastructure solution that we think is going to be a big driver for the rest of the city to know what is possible when people are intentional. And to your point about bold ideas, we think what is needed in that part of the world is not necessarily small incremental growth. It's very bold ideas that are a big departure from the present. And for that to happen, opportunities need to be created to de-risk as much of the journey as possible so people can be bold. And how do you de-risk new ideas? You de-risk new ideas by making it nearly impossible for them to fail because of the systems they operate in. If they fail, it should be on the merit of the idea, not because of the systems they operate in. And most ideas in our part of the world actually fail not on merit, that it's not a good or a bad idea. It's that the systems they are operating in do not support the ideas. And we felt that creating a buffer for ideas to thrive regardless of the system is going to be important. And so what we've done is to take a part of the city that, based off of multiple factors, we think is conducive to create an evolving green campus for up to 20 buildings clustered in that neighborhood. It's a journey. And we're on our 5th building at the moment to create live, work, play spaces at the core with all the infrastructure people will need to innovate and not worry about some things. And then bring global capital, global knowledge and access so that people can be bold to pursue new things. And then work with city government primarily to kind of create sandboxes that make some of these ideas thrive outside of the mainstream. And if they work out, then bring them to mainstream execution. And yeah, so far it's received both the local and global recognition things like this deserve, and the access to capital to continue to grow it. And it's been an exciting journey for us to do that and make it as inclusive as possible. And then also manage to create leaders from this part of the world that can engage in the global conversation around which direction the world should go. So it's two-pronged: building local leaders, and then giving them international access to be able to be part of a wider global community. And that's been what I've been part of for the last 7.5 years.
Well, that was amazing. Okay. And what I love about what you've just done is you've just woven global and local together in so many ways. So from a leadership point of view, you made that point right at the end, brilliant. But also in terms of finance, bringing global finance to this very small part of Accra, that's incredible. And the ambition and the aspiration is amazing. Absolutely love that. So look, there's loads of questions that have already formed in my mind, and we'll get questions through on the panel as well. I've got a couple just to kick things off, and I'm probably going to go in the order that I introduced you in. So I'll probably go with Joanne first. But obviously, this session is called "It's a Small World: Why Diversity of Outlook is More Important Than Ever," and it is. So I'll start with you, Joanne. What does diversity bring to business in this current environment?
So, for example, it's well documented the lack of gender representation in leadership positions. But what we've seen during the pandemic actually is female leaders perform much better within their countries. And we are aware of some of the statistics that have, again, plethora of research that's being developed about businesses who have that representation, particularly in the executive suite and the leadership team, make better decisions, are more productive, and nicer places to work. And so to have not just diversity in terms of people, but diversity of thought and diversity of backgrounds and experiences, it's well documented that actually that makes our organisations and our companies perform much better. When we talk about, we're in a global pandemic and we need to build back better, in terms of representation, we weren't there before the pandemic. We need to do something radical afterwards. I think we need to go back to looking beyond just building back better, but actually shaping the world and how we want the world to be. So that's my thoughts on kind of why diversity is important.
That's brilliant. I mean, I say it. But the phrase I use to explain why is diversity makes you stronger. Diversity makes you better. If you eat a diet that's that lacks in diversity, you're going to be ill. If you run a business that lacks diversity, you're going to come up with the same ideas. We get better ideas from speaking to people who aren't like us.
Sorry, on that point, Mark, even genetically, if we mix as human beings, as a race, we are stronger as people. Those parts of the world that haven't mixed genetically, that haven't had diverse genes, are less strong and less able to survive. So I like that point that you make. Yeah,
it's so important, and I know, and I won't have any truck with anybody that disagrees. We can go into this in detail, probably off camera, but it's one of my big frustrations is diversity deniers. They're as bad as climate change deniers. They're probably worse, and I'll not have it anymore. So, Joanne, the work you're doing sounds absolutely amazing. And just going back to the point, one of the points that Will made was how systemic failure is the big challenge. How in the UK, how has systemic failure made worse the lack of diversity that we see? And I take your point about diversity of thought and background as much as diversity in other ways.
I've got an example that's a bit depressing, really, to be honest, but I'll give you it anyway. So this week I've done a conversation for a literacy festival from a guy called Kevin Maxwell, who worked in the police. He worked for Greater Manchester Police, and he worked for the London Met. Now, Kevin was discriminated against and harassed in his workplace for being a black gay man, something he cannot change. His ability as a policeman was never under question. But actually, he ended up suffering after 8 years, never taking a day off sick, ended up really stressed as a result of the sort of harassment and discrimination he experienced. Instead of the organisation doing the right thing, recognising that they treated the member of staff really badly and do something to support them, the institution and the very way it operated then began to treat Kevin as enemy number one. They had go-level meetings about his potential to damage the reputation of the organisation. They tried to destroy him. They harassed him 40 times, 40 phone calls in a week while he was off work sick. So this shows you how an institution and way they operate and their policies and procedures, how they had groupthink. They all thought the same. They're sitting around a table, destroying a human being and not once turning around to each other and saying, should we be doing this? Is this the right thing? Like, literally, what has he done? You know, being a black gay man, he cannot change. And it wasn't about his merits as a police officer. It was something that he simply couldn't tolerate anymore, being different and the organisation not accepting it. Now, that for me is a massive example of institutional failure, of racism and discrimination, of what the organisation should have done is learn from that experience, listened to that experience and changed as a result. So that is not, it's not a happy example, but it is, I think it really demonstrates how our institutions, by the very way they operate and the way they behave, failed themselves, not just the individuals who they let down as well.
No, it's not a happy example, but it's a 3D example. It's an example that is so rich and quite clearly, as soon as you say it, you think, well, that's just fundamentally wrong, and that's a very clear example of that. Thank you, Joanne. And so I'll ask the same question of Oliver. So Oliver, what does diversity bring to business in the current environment?
All right, so for us, that because we just mentioned that we support lots of entrepreneurs and non-profit organizations. So like during the pandemic, that like those organizations or startups that really have to rapidly adapt to the situation. So I think the diversity exactly brings new ideas and new voices and new innovations. Because usually in the past, that for the startup or for like a social enterprises, that like it is more kind of like centralized organization within its operations. So like usually the founder or the boss says so, but like during the pandemic, that like the whole team or the whole organization should really quickly adapt to the new normal. So that is something that the founders or the leaders would listen to the team members. So I think the diversity would brings more like new ideas and new innovations to be able to adapt to the new situations. So I think that is the idea for that, and I think that is why diversity is quite important for those startups.
That's brilliant. Have you got an example of that with regards to the pandemic? Have you got an example of how diversity has helped the response in Taipei?
All right. So actually, for the diversity, there is a good example from one of our members within our community. So one of our members that they're kind of like a hackathon groups. So they got lots of people like from engineer, from thought leaders, from data analysis, and that like during the pandemic that the government actually support lots of pharmacies to sell the face masks, and then like it's kind of like under regulations. So like the citizens can actually buy the face masks like on certain days and like under certain amount. They cannot actually, like people cannot actually buy lots of or like huge amounts of face masks at a time. So like it is really hard for all of the people to understand that where is the closest pharmacies that can get the face masks. And then the hackathon to kind of like hack the system, so they collect all of the data, for all of the pharmacies around Taiwan, and then they build up a interactive map for the face masks. So all of the citizens can actually just get online and check, and then they can know like where are where are the closest pharmacies that can get the face masks, and if it's still available or not. So that is kind of like diversity brings in different people, and then different people trying to solve the problem together, like during
yeah,
the
and that diversity of thought is really important. When I build startups in big businesses, one of the things that I do is I make sure that we haven't just got the innovation team.
Yeah.
The innovation team are great, but actually I want to talk to the new starters. I want to talk to the people who aren't paid huge amounts of money because their ideas are as valid. In fact, they often give the biggest insights of the day. So that diversity of thought really, really matters. Yeah. Thank you, Oliver. And then the same question to you, Will. Can someone spotlight Will's video for me? Thank you. I love this. I'm like a director as well. So Will, what does diversity bring to business in the current environment?
So Mark, my take on this is primarily from the perspective of diversity based off of what parts of the world. So think of it from the coordinates that people are located in, and whether based off of their coordinates, the world is taking their thoughts into consideration as we shape a collective vision for ourselves and how the world should look like and what business should look like. So a friend of mine recently coined the term, I think the basic idea around it is that ideas as they are today in what shapes the world of business is not how relevant the idea is which coordinates of the on the world stage it's coming from. So an idea from Accra is not the same as an idea from San Francisco, unfortunately. So in terms of the diversity of thoughts that you reference, we have to be able to create a global landscape where ideas on the face of their merit is really important regardless of where it comes from. So there are things, for example, there are things that have developed in corners of Africa that will never see the light of global expansion just because of which parts of the world they've come. And there are things that are happening in parts of the world that could actually benefit from lessons and ideas that have been generated in corners, for lack of a better phrase, in dark corners of our world, of our part of the world, that could actually benefit. Let me give you a typical example. There was a year where it was difficult for the EU, for example, to actually track what kind of beef was good or bad, which source it was coming from, and all of these things. Whereas in the part of Africa, there have been years of basic technology, USSD technology, that could have been super helpful in helping the EU do exactly that. Because he had been applied to pharmaceuticals, helping giants like Pfizer and all of that to counter the counterfeit mafia that was creating fake pharmaceuticals in Africa. And we could track it by simply scratching off a unique code off of every product, sending that unique code to an SMS, and getting in less than 25 seconds, getting a response, yes, this is from the manufacturer, no, we have no clue what this is. And something as basic as that never saw true global use just because it came from the wrong coordinates. And so in terms of diversity, the idea is not necessarily based off race or anything. It's also which part of the equator you are situated and whether that has an influence in how far your ideas can go. And so in shaping global business, the future of global business and the collective future of the human race, diversity of thought has to also be that no matter where you live, provided your idea has relevance for the collective human race, it's taken on merit, and that it doesn't matter where it comes from. That idea is truly important for us at the meta level to engage that before we even go into the strata of whether you are male, female, and all of these. This central idea is going to be very important to shape global business.
Well, I'm so glad you actually arrived today, because I was very worried that you wouldn't. And you've added straight away, you've added such force and such power. And I love this whole idea of inequity based on coordinates, because you're right, that the idea that you would never even hear of those innovations, of those approaches, because of where on the planet you're from. Add on to that the other elements of prejudice and diversity. That's utterly staggering, Will. And I genuinely thank you for bringing that. So we've got these kind of really interesting
Mark,
systemic.
if you don't mind, the second layer to that is that the world needs to recognize that we collectively actually miss out on the potential of creating a line of defense in multiple locations around the world that actually impacts our collective future. So let me give you a typical example. Without this diversity of, like this idea of diversity based, regardless of where, inclusion regardless of where you're based, global pandemics like this present situation we are having will continue to exist. Because what happens is that the line of defense that we need to build in every single state so that these things don't explode, we are not doing that right now because there's a gap between North and South. So northern states tend to consolidate thoughts and all of these things in there, and let's just pass on things back to southern states. And there's no revolving door where ideas flow the other way. So what tends to happen is that in cases where there's a pandemic like this and it starts from the south, there's no line of defense to actually make sure that we can counter it before northern states can engage with it. So then knowledge has to come from the north, and that waiting period can determine how far pandemics go. So in the case of, say, Ebola, if there was a revolving door of knowledge exchange, southern states would have managed to kind of stem as much of it as possible before it gets into a global epidemic where it affects everyone and we are all having to shut our airports and all of this. So the world actually loses if we don't engage on an equal footing in developing knowledge and sharing knowledge in a way that elevates players in the southern parts of the world to equals in a way that we can actually collaborate. And we all lose out and get to places like this where we are having to be reactionary instead of precautionary. And these are amazing telltale signs of just a lack of inclusion on the global stage.
I can see that, and I wonder, Will. I know I'm sticking with you for a little bit. We'll balance it in a minute, but I wonder if China's investment in Africa. I wonder if that whole kind of like second wave colonialism, where China is investing significantly in Africa. Do you think that is going to free up ideas from Africa and bring them to a global market, or do you think it's going to quash them and pull them just back to China?
Unfortunately, it's another extreme version of something that has already happened before, right? So Chinese incursion, for the lack of a better word, into Africa doesn't come with the same level of, it's even worse in the level of engagement it has, because what it does is dump Chinese ideas in a way that even does not even pretend to want to engage. So it just, both the labor, the capital, and the knowledge, there's no pretension that any of it wants to engage with locals. It's all about an advancement and marching, Chinese power marching forward with no recourse to local communities. That is even an even worse version of what I'm talking about. So like you rightly pointed out, and your phrasing is perfect, a second wave colonialism, and it's even much worse than the previous because it has the illusion of progress, but without any of the retention capacity that progress is supposed to bring. So you could develop with all great rail systems and all of it, but if Chinese knowledge were to be taken out of it, it collapses quickly. And that is an even worse form of it, I guess.
I know. I agree entirely. It's an alarming state of affairs. Thank you, Will. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back to Joanne for the next question. Joanne, how are you? Still there?
Of course.
Amazing. So, Joanne, look, I mean, this is your bread and butter, right? This is how you earn your money, and this is how you earn your change. And I don't care if I'm ever a millionaire, but I want to make £1 million worth of change. That's what I want. That's what I want to do, right? So, how can businesses ensure that they're empowering diverse voices? What can a business do to make this work rather than make it look like it works?
They have to challenge their own biases. So, you know, what Will was talking about there in terms of engaging, not even pretending to engage, you know, organisations that I come across, sometimes there's an arrogance of we know better and we're doing this to this group, or we're doing this, rather than how do we work together, how do we collaborate, how do we all learn. So in terms of what businesses can do, they have to, you know, challenge the biases in recruitment. They have to challenge the biases in research and development. They have to challenge their biases right across what they do as an organisation. And to do that, you kind of have to admit you have a problem first. You know, if you want to say, I need to change, it's a bit like other areas of concern, you know, people who have addictions. You have to admit that actually you might not have it right right now. So a lot of organisations think, well, we've got this far, we've done it this way, you know, why do we need to change? But actually there's great benefits, as, you know, Will and Oliver have both described, in terms of having diversity of thought, thinking people, you know, customers. Your organisation is stronger and better for it. So, but in order to get there, you have to challenge the way you do things currently.
I love that, and I've written down, as you were talking, I've written, yeah, but how do you even know you've got a bias? And that question is still really valid. You know, the changes that we've seen in society since the murder of George Floyd have asked massively tricky questions of people who would before that have said it's not me. I'm not like that.
There's a simple trick. There's a simple trick. If I ask you, you know, you've got your family and friends. If I ask you, you know, list 10 people who are completely in your circle of trust. Look at those 10 people and tell me about them. They're usually similar age. You know, if you put your family aside to one side, similar age, similar background, similar education, you know, and, you know, sometimes some people are surrounded by diversity within their own community, and they are more likely to have diverse range of people in their circle of trust. But most of us go for who we like and who we identify with. Now, on my MBA the other day, it was a really interesting topic that come up, you know, the Myers-Briggs indicators, and, you know, there's different types of personalities. People, if you put employee within your organization, everybody who's an extrovert, how far are you going to get as an organization when everyone behaves the same way? So you're actually looking for the opposite of yourself. You're looking, you know, as an entrepreneur, I don't want somebody who's extrovert, who can do the things I do. I want someone who's going to sit back and hold me down and ask me tough questions because they think differently to me. So yeah, I think even just the basic in terms of recruitment, it's an absolute natural tendency to go for who you like. So assume you have that bias in the first place, because most of us do.
Well, completely. I would say that everyone does, and I've been in organisations where when I've left, I've been described as, yeah, but it wasn't like us. No, that's why I was important, and we forget that. But this necessitates a business having a better mirror and looking into a better mirror and seeing things as they truly are. How do we even begin to get businesses to do that in a different way?
Sorry, was that a question to me? I'm just a little bit confused. I've just got
Did you get some side noise? I did as well.
No, I got a different picture. So you're asking me how businesses can begin to do that?
How can they develop a better mirror? How can they honestly look at themselves in the mirror and see what other people see rather than what they see?
So you do it by asking people what they see, you know, and having those honest conversations. So on a very basic level, you know, when I set up Innovision a long time ago, I first set it up as a social enterprise. I was studying for a degree, but it was a really important thing. Every evaluation form I used for my theses, but what every evaluation form taught me about just setting up in business is I was getting daily information back about customer experience and their experience of interacting with me. So that's the first thing you can do in terms of, you know, being really developing great relationships with customers where they give you honest opinions about your product, services, and everything else. In terms of employees, you have to do the same thing. You have to connect, you have to be able to communicate. But, you know, in different structures of leadership within organizations, you know, to develop a relationship where people can be open with you to give you that feedback, that's what you're aiming for. You want to be flexible as an organization, that you respond to what you hear as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. And how easy has this been for you? I mean, this is, as I say, this is your bread and butter. This is what you do. This is your crackers and hummus. How has this, how do you go down in organizations? What are the main barriers that you receive when you go in to try and change the way people think and look at these issues?
Well, I don't push for work, Mark. I don't tackle anybody who doesn't want tackling. So people are coming to me because they know they want to do something differently. And I can literally sense from being in a reception of an organisation, the culture of the workplace. And I suppose that's because I've been a consultant for 30 years, but it's actually really telling of how staff feel about the workplace, how they treat people who come into the workplace. So just from the reception, you can tell about culture within an organisation. I'm very direct. I liked what was said about your coordinates within the world. Within our coordinates, I identify with Ghana of having a big attitude for such a little place in terms of Liverpool. But we are very direct as one of our, you know, our cultural traits. You know, organisations just can't handle that sometimes, and then they don't employ me, and that's okay. But in terms of organisations, you know, those who come to me want to change, and they're the ones I work with. I'm not running around trying to change people who don't want to.
As Dave said, if you don't want to get it, then you're never going to get it.
Yeah.
I can see that enormously. Amazing. Thank you, Joanne. We'll come back with another question in a minute. But Oliver, so the same question goes to you, really, Oliver. How can businesses ensure that they're empowering diverse voices? How does that happen? How does that happen in Taiwan? What is it diverse in Taiwan, and how do you ensure that they're brought into organizations that you work with?
I think it can be achieved by two ways based on my personal experience or personal leading of the team. I think there will be the first one is that to create a very comfortable environment so that people can actually speak, they can voice out, and just like you gotta create a very safe environment. So that could be like a very open atmosphere for the team members so they can voice out. And the second one is that active listening. So active listening will lead to encouragement of the voices. So once you listen or you tell the team members to listen to the other team members, then like people will just speak up because they think that they are being trusted and that they are empowered to provide their ideas, provide their different voices. So I think it can be like achieved by these two ways for empowering diverse voices.
I love that. I really do. And I often say the other half of the talking deal is listening, and we have to be open and we have to listen. And empowering people to speak up is one thing. Ensuring people take seriously what's said and consider it in a realistic way, that's another thing. So they may be in the room. My daughter used to say this to me: Dad, you're in the room, but you're not really present. And I kind of get that. So how do you ensure that people who are there and appear to be listening, how do you ensure that they take seriously those voices that they wouldn't normally hear?
I think trust is something matters. Yeah. So like usually that we spend a lot of time building up the trust within like different team members, and that is something that like if you think, or if the other thing that they are trusted, then they will be like kind of like presented like at the moment. So the others would be actively listen as well. So I think trust is something that we think that is the first thing like upon like listening, and also like for all of the communications.
Okay, brilliant. I love that.
To Mark, to that point, right? There's a bit of this that will just happen naturally. We don't have to ensure anything.
Yeah.
The beauty of the global landscape today is that without diversity, it hurts you where it matters the most, your bottom line and profit.
Your wallet.
And, exactly. And that in itself, it's enough stick. All we have to do is a bit of dangling carrot, but even that carrot, we can throw it out. That stick is strong enough to whip any business that really cares about their bottom line, to understand that there are two things that's in their interest. The diversity they bring, whether it's geographic diversity in terms of thoughts from around the world, or kind of racial diversity or gender diversity, it's going to, naturally, people are voting with their money now, right? And there is enough groups of people who believe this is important enough to decide how they spend their capital. And those that have taken advantage of that situation and understanding that people vote with their money, and in a consumerism fraud society, and if you are selling, you need to take that into account. How do people view you? And now it's not even about just the cosmetics of it. It's not just about, oh, we are acting like we are diverse. People are so in tune with this that they'll go into the depth of it. Are you just dangling some token people in there to give the optics of diversity, or are you truly committed? And we are seeing it all across. And so companies and businesses are having to do more than optics. So it's not throw a few ads here and there, hire a black woman somewhere and check some boxes. Those don't cut it anymore. And so that in itself, the fact that there's a global consciousness that you vote with your money, and businesses feel the hurt the most when you show them that your money goes where your mouth is, that is in itself enough stick. The second part of it is that without diversity, you get into these storms that no one wants, right? The good and bad of this global social media dynamic, which is that things get blown out of proportion, which for me is always a big issue, is that you can't risk being misunderstood anymore, because the difference between your brand going under, being a top performing S&P company, to going under and underperforming is just a Twitter storm. And so you can't afford to be misunderstood anymore. And how can you make sure you are not misunderstood? It goes through filters of diversity, multiple viewpoints before things come out of your company. So any form of communication that could be misconstrued by minorities or by people goes through those kinds of people themselves, who can look at it through a lens that tell you, nah, this is not going to sit well with a certain group of people. That form of diversity internally is now a filter everyone needs. You can't do without it, period.
Well, and we can see everything now. You know, we can see everything now. You're not what you say you are, we're what we say you are.
Exactly.
I love that word. I really do. But the thing that frustrates me is, for a long, long time, and with some companies still, they get through, they make profit and they sell product, and yet they're not diverse. That lack of transparency is slowing them down, but it hasn't stopped them. Do you? I mean, maybe we ask everybody this. Can we get Joanne on the grid as well? Is that okay? She's sat at the top of my page. I'd love to have her on the main grid too. I'm really interested. One of the people watching has been talking to a company about how you run an equitable business. So moving beyond diversity to equality, to equitability, how do we run an equitable business? And I'm going to ask Joanne that first, actually. If we can get her, can we pin Joanne's video as well? Would that be okay? Andrew? I don't think that's better. Yeah. That's what I'd like to see.
So in terms of equality, you know, First of all, great points, Will. I think that's really good in terms of it's just a twist a storm away. Whole reputations can be ruined. Companies, changing the shades of the people on their adverts to go to another country. We're all aware of this now in this global market. And also because of the pandemic, we really have, well, I had a list early on in the pandemic who the good businesses were and who weren't in terms of how they behaved, how they treated the staff. And there is some companies I won't give my money to anymore. Some companies still, are getting away with it. There was really, especially in terms of marketing, it's an area where you just think, surely, this is being run past expertise. Surely you're aware of how that would impact on that community. So when we talk equality, people like to celebrate diversity, and diversity is great. That's to celebrate that, we are all different as people and we're all great and we all should be celebrated. It's a fantastic thing. But we have to recognize that some people are at extreme disadvantage in terms of just being as an equal footing from everybody else. So if we look again that the global pandemic has brought us the disparities in terms of impact on the poorest people, for example, in the UK, are much more impacted by the global pandemic because of their issues of poverty and those communities. It's impacted to a worse extent. So you can't celebrate everybody without ensuring that everybody is there at the table.
Yeah.
So equality is really important. Don't just focus on diversity and inclusion. You have to make sure. So someone described it to me once like this, diversity is holding a party and inviting everybody. Inclusion is inviting people to dance to really make sure they're a part of the party. But equality is making sure that person can get there in the first place. They've got a dress, they've got the bus fare, they can go to the party at all. So all aspects of that equality and diversity inclusion need to be tackled. But don't focus on celebrating diversity until you've thought about how have we made this equal for people.
Joanne, that's brilliant. That analogy is absolutely beautiful. Thank you for that. And then we've only got a few minutes left. But Oliver, how do you build an equitable business?
All right, so that is a great question for me because we actually just built the Impact Hub here in Taipei for just 5 years, and yeah, but I think just like what Joanne has said, that to invite other people to the table, and also to let everyone got the fair opportunities. I think that's the main thing that we can build an equitable company, because you give everyone the same opportunities and fair opportunities for speaking or for giving their ideas, and that is something quite central to what we just build the companies. So I think that is something that.
That's brilliant. Oliver, thank you. Thank you very much. And then finally, we've got a couple of minutes left. Will, how do we build an equitable business?
I think we start with reshaping what validation means, and reorienting the world around boxes that needs to be checked. If there is any box to be checked, what is it? What do we collectively agree now are the boxes to be checked? Are the boxes to be checked continuously going to be your Oxford degree, your Harvard degree, who your parents are, which part of the world you grew up in, how much money you have in your bank account? What does the world collectively decide today are the key indicators of potential success and the potential contributions of people generally, given our shifting ideas around what we all want. And I think if we can decide what those new metrics are, then we can begin to create new systems to validate those metrics. So for example, I've seen new experiments around blind hiring, for example, where you are not checking necessarily where someone went to school, for example. You're checking on the face of this paper document that I'm looking at, given the people's experiences, the recommendations they had, the impact they've had on their last company and all of these things. is this someone I would like to work with? Do their values align with mine? Do they seem to have the same level of experience that I want, and all of these things? And then maybe at a later date, I get to know that they went to XYZ. Is it fair to those that also then work hard to get certain validations? Those are all very big questions we have to ask ourselves as a society. But I think we start building equitable businesses by reshaping the basics of what we consider as boxes to check as indicators of merit. And as it stands now, the things that we use to validate human beings and then based off of that, give them opportunities, need realigning.
Brilliant. I love that. Right. Well, look, that's a great way to end. We're right at the end of our hour. We could talk all day. You've all been amazing. And the words that popped out for me, the words that came out again and again and again: trust, listening, validation, barriers to entering, equity, equitability. That your point, Joanne, was absolutely, that analogy of the party was absolutely brilliant. That you might want to dance to all the music that's there. It might be a diverse range of music and a diverse range of people's there. If you can't get there, you ain't going to do any dancing. I absolutely love that. And I finish with where I started. Diversity is strength. Thank you all. Oliver, Will, Joanne, thank you. I can't thank you enough. You've been amazing, and you've added a real strength to the day. And genuinely, you've been great. Thank you. And so if you're interested in staying around for anybody else, the next session is on in 20 minutes at 2 o'clock UK time. And it's Women of the World. It's a man's world, or is it? So we'll be back in 20 minutes for that one. I'm going to rush, have a wee, maybe get some food. Thank you all so much. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, everyone. Bye.
And you, Joanne.
Bye. Bye.